Hey there, welcome to another episode of Life Design Plus, where we are mastering the art of living your authentic life. This week kicks off summer break for the boys, and because of that, I'm taking a little bit of time off and going to go back to the archives for this week's episode. And in this episode, I wanted to revisit my conversation with Scott Krava, the founder of DRMN BG. Part of the reason for this is Scott and I caught up last week. He was top of mind. I thought his story was great, and it's been a minute since the episode has aired, and a good chance if you're new to the show, you didn't hear this. This was back when the podcast was on our pursuit, and we cover the journey of starting a clothing brand, DRMN BG, that's more than just a clothing brand. There's a mission behind it. There is a community building, a very good conversation, and although you may not be starting your own clothing brand, there's a lot to learn from Scott. So I wanted to revisit this conversation. As always, drop some comments down below. Let Scott know what about his story resonated with him. Although this is an old episode, it's still relevant to today. And I'll probably have Scott back before too long to give an update on his journey, talk about a struggle that he is going through right now. Not really a struggle, but an unexpected, unplanned life event that has actually probably going to help DRMN BG in the long run. I'll let him share that in the future. So enjoy this episode. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode with my friend Bijan Mason, and we're going to have a great conversation about Ikigai and finding your why. A very fun conversation. So for now, enjoy this conversation from the archives with Scott Krava. Hello there. Welcome back to another episode of On Our Pursuit. I'm excited to introduce you to my new friend, Scott Krava. Now, Scott is the founder of the brand DRMN BG. He is the maker of the hoodie you see me wearing right now. This will be one of the few brands outside of Pursuit that you'll see me rocking from time to time. I came across Scott and I came across DRMN BG thanks to Instagram. The ads were on point, and I ended up really enjoying watching the work that he was doing with the sweatshirts and the t-shirts. So I ended up buying one and absolutely loved the design and everything behind it. So I became such a fan of his just through Instagram, and the ads hit me up that I decided to reach out to him to learn more about DRMN BG, learn more about what it is he was doing, and to hear his story. Now, one of the things you're going to notice right away is Scott likes to deval the words like I do. Pursuit doesn't have the vowels. DRMN BG he has stripped out as well. You hear more about this sweatshirt in this conversation and the design behind it and some things maybe you don't notice right now, but after you hear Scott talk about why he created the sweatshirt the way he did will make more sense. Leading into this episode, a few things I want you to pay attention to, since I always try to give you something to focus on as we come into it. I want you to first pay attention to Scott's creative process. I really enjoy creativity and people expressing themselves, learning more about how he became a creator and starting this company years ago with him and his friends with no real background in creating. The second thing I want you to pay attention to is how he's been able to continue to build DRMN BG over the years while having a corporate job as well. Not every pursuit needs to be starting a business and going all in on it right out the gate. It can be something you do on the side that is a passion that allows you to build a business slowly, and then maybe at one point you do make that jump. And the final thing I want you to pay attention to, we spent a decent amount of time talking about community, and that's something that I think is very important. I have a community for financial advisors that I've started. It's a very big buzzword right now, but listen to how we have this conversation about community and how I see the potential for DRMN BG to have a community and how you could go about building that. Maybe community is a part of what you'll do in the future. Maybe seeking a community is another one, but it's a conversation piece that I didn't have planned. It was not a part of the outline. It just naturally came up, and we spent a decent amount of time talking about community, so I wanted to bring that to your attention as well. All right, before we get to the episode, as always, I'm going to ask you for a favor. Take a moment throughout the conversation. Whenever you hear something that really speaks to you, head to the comments and let Scott know what it was about that comment, how he motivated you, how he inspired you. Yes, I would love to get comments to help this show rise up, but really I want Scott to get feedback because as a creator, you don't always get to hear how your words and your advice or your story impacts people. And sometimes that feedback is just the thing you need as a creator, as an entrepreneur during a tough time to keep on pushing forward. So let Scott know what you enjoyed about his story, how he motivated you to keep him going as he goes on his pursuit. All right, with that, I will let you get to this episode with Scott Krava, the founder of DRMN BG, as we talk about building the brand, his creative process, community, and so much more. Enjoy the episode. The name DRMN BG has no vowels in it. And for whatever reason, I have been a fan of eliminating devaluing words. So pursuit, P-R-S-T. I have a little side project I've done before where I stripped out most of the vowels of financial advisor so it looks like Financial Advisor. why did you take the vows out of dreaming big when you started this brand?
We'll probably get into this more later, but I think that was one of the things that I was probably most strategic about when I came up with the concept, in that, I wanted to have this more of a positive message type brand, which back in when I was brainstorming this, like 15 years ago now, like I didn't see a lot of. So I saw an opportunity there, but I didn't want it to be too clean cut, if that makes sense. And I also wanted one of the things I learned when I was, sometime in high school is that with anything creative, like if it doesn't catch someone's eye, you've already kind of lost. That's like the first thing that needs to happen before anything else can be considered by the consumer. So I thought, okay, if I take the vowels out, that right there is going to at least cause someone to probably stop to try to figure out what it means, what it stands for. That was really it. And I wanted it to kind of be cryptic a little bit, and I wanted people to have to stop and think about what it says, what it means. And in doing so, they're spending time thinking about my brand. It's, they're contemplating, and it's, kind of planting a seed in their head that is, whether it relates to my brand or not, but it's the positive message, whatever that's reinforcing for them or wherever that's reminding them of, that was the goal in naming it what it is. The other thing too is like, at the time it's like you want to come up with a unique name, and it's like you could Google similar brands that are dreaming big dream, whatever variation of it. I wanted it to be different from all those in some way, shape, or form, and taking the vowels out did that for me. That's pretty much it.
So you were ahead of the game of devoweling, because I feel like that's something in the last few years I've noticed more people doing. So you were thinking of it way. So you are a futuristic creative.
I mean, thanks. I don't know. I'll take it. I don't know if I am, but I'll take it.
So going back 15 years or so ago, when you were beginning to develop this brand, what was so important to having a brand that was a positive message, just versus just a cool brand? Like, why was it important to have that strong positive message behind it?
I just felt like it was something different, like I looked at all these other street brands that were popular at the time. And granted, like I was living in Des Moines, Iowa at the time, which is a smaller market, Iowa in general isn't necessarily exposed to, the bigger brands, the trendy things that are happening on the coast until, a couple of years later. I assume that's probably changed, within the past couple of years, or if not more, with, just the internet and the connectedness that we all have now. But, I really just thought there was an opportunity there to kind of like do what everyone else in streetwear is doing, but do it a little bit differently with a message that empowers people. And at the end of the day, I was like, all right, that's great. That's like something that I could just realistically spend the rest of my life doing, like encouraging people in some way, shape, or form to build their dreams, to chase their dreams, to build the life they want to live in whatever pursuit that is, whether it's creative, whether it's, they're an athlete or, an entrepreneur, whatever it may be. I just felt like it was a common message that would resonate with a lot of people. And at the end of the day, if I can use my creative stuff to help empower people to take a jump or whatever that may be towards something they weren't sure they could do, I love that.
Well, the thing that's pretty cool about it is, not only are you creating this message to inspire and empower and having cool clothes, because I don't know, I'm one of the people that I get inspired by the things I might be wearing. So putting on your hoodie or looking at your things, like I'm the type of person that inspires me. Music inspires me. So there are a lot of people out there, but not only are you creating, not only are you giving me an opportunity to express myself and empower myself creatively, but you're showing us how to do it by having this brand and doing it yourself. Like you're dreaming big yourself with your brand, in addition to helping us all dream big as well, which I think is really cool. And I see parallels to pursuit as well. Like I want people to pursue their passions and align their spirit, mind, body, and money, find their authentic life. And I'm doing that myself through the creation of pursuit and these things. So I think it's pretty cool Was that intentional to say, hey, not only is this here, but watch me as I do it myself?
No, it's interesting you say that because, we met like 20 minutes ago, via video, and you were able to come up with that almost instantly. It took me probably up until like 3 years ago to realize like that's what I'm doing, and to like make that connection, that, okay, I can take like my day-to-day stuff and what I'm learning from that, or, whether good or bad, and I can share that with other people to hopefully help them. And it's like, wow, this all kind of, it all kind of runs in a natural cycle that like makes sense to me. And like, once I actually sat down and had that realization, things started to click in a different way, which was awesome. So it's interesting that you were able to pick up on that, almost instantly. I love that.
I think it just feeds into my belief of like aligning spirit, mind, and body. I always leave money out because like money is an important part of it, but I think that those three things make that easier. And it sounds like as you've gone on your journey, slowly but surely this alignment was falling into place. And for whatever reason, the light bulb went off of what I'm doing is what I'm trying to inspire people. And I can not only, lead, but I can actually educate them through my full-time job that I'm doing, the knowledge I get there. So I think that it's just shows how this alignment makes things fall into place. And it sounds like once you made that connection, things kind of became maybe a little bit easier. Maybe the direction became easier once you found that alignment.
100%. It gave me direction on where it gave me direction on where I could go. And it made it, in hindsight, I think it kind of gave me a mindset shift from one of creative scarcity, so to speak, to one of abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you're a Rick Rubin guy or not. I think you might be based on one of your articles that you wrote. But that was one of the chapters that like I listened to it like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, holy cow, I can relate to this so well. Mm-hmm. The abundant mindset. And it's like once I was able to adapt that, I guess, it was a huge relief. It was like, oh, wow, like this river is just kind of flowing all the time. And I took a lot of comfort in that, because for a long time I thought, I'm doing this thing. I don't really know how to do it. I'm watching what others are doing and kind of doing my version of it. But and that was fine. I learned a lot from doing it that way. But at the end of the day, a part of me was just like, well, how do I get ahead? Mm-hmm. How do I get ahead if I'm trying to, I have a few ideas here and there, but I'm kind of just hanging on to them, and I don't know if any more are going to come. How do I get ahead? And then once I had adopted or realized I was transitioning to this abundant mindset, it was like, oh, I can do this for a very long time. I can do this till I die, mm-hmm. Which is great.
Yeah. I am a big Rick Rubin fan. I have the book over there. I've probably given away like 10 copies of it. Yes. And I love Rick Rubin for many reasons. One, he's created a lot of music that I love. I love how he transcends genres. Like most producers live in a certain genre. So he would be only a hip hop producer because he started in hip hop, but he's country like everywhere. And then now he's transformed into this kind of like spiritual guru for musicians who come to him. And like, I just love everything about him. And I would love to be a producer, but I'm not musical at all. Can't play an instrument, never have. But as I've listened to his interviews over the years, he doesn't do any of that either. He produces just by listening and giving people inspiration. I'm like, well, maybe one day I could do that. So I love Rick Rubin, and his message is really, really, I think it's a powerful one. And what I hope comes from these conversations with individuals like yourself is that I think that for a lot of people who are living the lives that maybe they're not feeling fulfilled in, I think creativity and expressing your own inner creator, however that might be, is a great guide to find your way towards something that might bring you more happiness. Maybe it's a new career, or maybe it's just a little side thing. But creativity, I think, oftentimes is pigeonholed to art and music and photography. But like, you can be creative out in a garden and expressing yourself creatively, being a gardener, or like, there's tons of ways to be creative. And I just think there is a great connection between, and this would go to Rick Rubin, that our inner creator, I think, comes from our heart, and our heart is a connection to the source, and there's this flowing. And if you can get that alignment again, I think it leads you in a great direction to help you find more happiness and a more fulfilled life. So I love that you like Rick, and it's probably no surprise that we're both Rick Rubin fans and connecting across this stuff. So
have you finished the book?
I have, yeah. I pre-ordered it as soon as I saw it was coming out, and
Same.
I realized that my book wasn't going to, the book was going to come later in the day, whatever, like January 16th or whatever. So I bought the audio book to start listening to it, partially too because Rick narrates it, which makes it even better.
That was one of the, like, when I first heard his voice on the audio version, I was just like, yes, this is going to be something that I'm going to come back to for years to come.
I've got a book that I'll send you, but I would encourage you to get it on audio as well. And anybody listening, if you're listening, you might like it as well. It's Questlove's book. It's called The Creative. I forget the second part of it. But it's about the creative process, very similar to kind of Rick, but a different angle. But Questlove narrates his book as well. And there's like music he puts into it and beats in the background. Like it's probably the best audiobook I've ever listened to because of the experience. So I'll send you the physical, and then you got to get yourself the audio version of it.
Done. I've got credits just waiting to be burned. So,
so going back to dreaming big, as I kind of take our conversation all over the place, you mentioned being influenced by street brands. What were the street brands back then that you were pulling your inspiration from?
Man, that's tough. I think the biggest one that comes to mind without giving it a bunch of deep thought is Young and Reckless. Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't know that I was necessarily inspired creatively by it, but I think I was inspired by the way that Drama, the creator of it, kind of made it happen overnight. Granted, he had a lot of platforms in place that allowed for that rapid growth, but I don't know. For some reason, I remember thinking, like, if he can do this, and I don't think he had a lot of experience in that industry going into it, there's no reason that I can't either. And which I didn't have anything else sound to go off of other than that. It was just like, well, if that guy can do it, I can too. And, you know, at that time, I didn't know a lot of what I was planning to do or what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to do something. I don't have any formal education in art or being an entrepreneur. I have a degree in kinesiology, which isn't really, it's a little bit of everything, you know? So yeah, that's a big reason why my process is a little bit more drawn out. You know, a lot of things didn't come to me until I started doing them, which you know, there were times I struggled with that, and now I've come to, you know, just embrace it as part of my journey, and you know, things happen for a reason, and all that. I know we're going to get into, you know, doing things, would I do anything different, or if I have any regrets or anything like that later. But to go back to your original question, you know, truth be told, like, I'm not super into fashion. It's not something that I study a lot of. I'm not really looking at what other trends there are or anything like that. And maybe that's something that helps me, is that I don't see all these other brands and stuff doing things that would potentially deter me from doing my own, because as a result, I might, you know, see it and be like, oh, someone else is already doing that, blah, blah, blah. And, so yeah, I don't, aside from Young and Reckless, I don't know that I had a ton of brands that I was like, ooh, I want to make a version of that. It was more, I would see designs that I would like that would speak to me in a certain way. And it was like, ooh, I wonder if I could do a Dreaming Big version of that. And I know we're going to talk about creative process later, you know, in one of the first designs that I did was like a remake of the Tabasco logo for Dreaming Big. Why? I'm not really sure. I do like Tabasco. I'm not like a fan of it, but I don't know. It was something about the logo that I just liked. And I think when you can envision like what their logo looks like and how you would revamp it, when you have that vision, it makes it a little bit easier to pursue it. But, yeah, other than that, like, I didn't have a ton of brands kind of lighten the way for me, so to speak.
It's funny you mentioned Young and Reckless, because prior to maybe 6 months ago, I wouldn't have known that brand. I went down the path of Cole Bennett, you know, Lyrical Lemonade, and what his music video producing and all that stuff. And it led me to an interview when he was on Drama's podcast. And I was listening to the podcast and I was like, that dude sounds familiar. And I saw him like, he looks really familiar. And then I put it together that it was Drama from Ridiculousness and Rob Dyrdek stuff. So going back to like, okay, this guy has no formal background in a clothing company, built it up to be really big. And in addition, if you watch the show, you're like, Drama doesn't look like he's very ambitious at all. So surely if Drama can do it from the way he was portrayed on MTV, then, I could go do it as well. So I think it's interesting that I wouldn't have known Young and Reckless if we had talked a year ago, but the brand that kind of inspired you to get going, I actually know of just by chance. So that's kind of cool.
Right. And but it's no knock on Drama by any means.
Oh, no. I know.
It was, and I know that's not what you were saying either, but I don't want anyone else to think that like I'm hating on Drama, because that's definitely not it. It was more just like, all right, I think I can do what that guy's doing. And, like you said, like he's on Robin Big, Ridiculousness, Fantasy Factory, like every week, and you're seeing him wearing the stuff, and it's like, all right, I see what process he's using. Like he's got someone creating stuff for him. He's using his appearances on TV to market it out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, there was just something about it that I was like, I can do that too. Mm-hmm. I just need a TV show.
Exactly. I want to stay with the fact that fashion isn't something that like excites you. Like, maybe that's not the right way to put it, but that fashion is not something that like you're super, super drawn to, yet here you have this clothing brand. What is it about expressing yourself through the hoodies and the shirts and the hats that versus going another direction? Because you could have spread the message of dreaming big through other avenues. If you're not somebody who's really always been into fashion, why do you think the clothing brand spoke to you so much?
Man, that's a good question. I should probably spend some time on that one. I do remember growing up. I can't remember how old I was, probably in high school at some point. And granted, like I said earlier, living in Iowa, in Des Moines, that's a small, big city, if you will. We just didn't have a ton of options compared to others. And I remember at one point having the thought, like, I could make something better than what's available right now. Mm-hmm. I think that's what I was drawn to. And I didn't, at that time, I had no visions of starting a clothing brand or anything like that. But for some reason that stuck to me. And I mean, that was probably a good 25 years ago that I had that thought. So there was a small seed there to some extent. Why did I gravitate towards clothing compared to like just doing, printed art or anything like that? I really don't know. I think I just wanted maybe it was the walking billboard aspect of clothing that like people are promoting it and using it to express themselves. Now, looking back on how I've done everything, I'm really glad that I chose clothing, because one of my core values now for like anything I design is like you said earlier, I want people to feel a certain way when they wear their dream big gear. I want them to feel empowered. Mm-hmm. Like when you put your like the right combo outfit on and you just like look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, wow, I look great. I feel good. Like that's how I want people to feel, whether it's with my stuff or not. But like there is something about making people feel a certain way. And if they feel good about themselves, it's going to impact them in a positive way.
I'm a big believer in look good, feel good, be good. Like I've written about it before and talked about it before. And my little asterisk next to all that is it's look good, feel good, be good for yourself. Like how you feel. So when you look in the mirror and you feel like you look good, doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. If you feel like you look good, you're going to walk around with a little more confidence. You're going to do a little bit better. So I love that. And one of the things I love about like design, the sweatshirt I'm wearing today, I make sure everybody can see it. I love the fact that like the intentionalness of putting the dreamer upside down to everybody else. Now, I don't know if this is the reason why, but the reason I like it is when I look down, I'm reading it for me. And I have, which that resonates with my thought process. I have 2 tattoos on my forearm that are positioned for me to see, not for everybody else. The rest of my arm is for everybody else, but I have a couple things that when I look down, they're looking at me so I can see it versus for everybody else. So like when I see your hoodies and your shirts and Dreamers upside down, like for me, I knew immediately that was for the person wearing it to look down and to be reminded, which I think is really cool because everything else usually is for it's the billboard side of things. You want everybody else who sees it to read it and want it, versus this is for the person wearing it. And the cool thing is, even though you see it upside down, you know what it says. Like, so it still works from the billboard standpoint, but I love that intentional design behind it.
And it's funny you mentioned that. I'm reminded, like, a couple weeks ago, I got a DM from someone. They're like, "Yeah, I like it, but I really think you should flip it so it's right side up, because it's going to cause a lot of people to stop you and ask you what it means." And I'm like, exactly. I didn't respond to it, but I was just like, it's kind of the point.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I didn't even think about that part. The part of, it being upside down and somebody asking, well, what's that mean and why? And it made me think of the financial advisor sweatshirts that I made. Like, when I would wear it, because there's no vowels, I get tons of people talk about it. Oh, good thing you're good with money because you can't spell for shit. Like, it just little conversation pieces. And other advisors who have bought it have said that, like, when they wear it, inevitably somebody's going to ask them a question about it. It's just a conversation piece. So I didn't even think about that on the flip drink.
That's what you want. You want people, if people are talking about your thing, like, that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. Assuming it's positive, but it's like they're spending time on it. We're so distracted. We have so many things that we could focus on throughout the day. And if someone's willing, if they're going to be spending a few minutes talking about your thing, like, that's a positive. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to your point, like, yes, the intention was so that, the Dreamer was for you. And also the arrangement of the different assets forms a smile. That's part of it too.
I did get that as well. Yeah. When thinking of the creative process, I don't want to get to the creative process quite yet, but I want to think more about Dreaming Big, the brand. Do you have aspirations of it being bigger? Like, I think of, like, the Hundreds. I don't know if you've ever read Bobby Hundred's book, This Is Not a T-Shirt, but in it he talks about how the 100th Street brand ended up turning out to be like this big, massive community, even though they didn't set out for it. In today's world, people are starting communities and they're very intentional about trying to build it, but because the Hundreds had a meaning behind it, it grew and had a following and community came from it. And, like, there's opportunity I see for Dreaming Big to be bigger than just the clothing brand. If you want to empower people and help, as the brand grows, as the community grows, there could be opportunities to do other things under the Dreaming Big umbrella to help that, whether that be, courses on, hey, here's how you go manufacture gear, which, because you have an abundant mindset, maybe you would do that, because the reality of it is there's enough people to buy sweatshirts and hoodies, and you might help somebody in the Dreaming Big community start their own brand that in theory might be a competitor to yours, but they're going to have a different message and a different audience. So just curious about, like, where you see the brand going. Is it kind of going to stay in the lane you're in today, or do you have bigger aspirations for it?
Definitely have bigger aspirations for it. I'm trying to figure out what that is. I've, like, everything that you just outlined, those are things that I've been chewing on for some time. I've tried to form various communities throughout the years that haven't lasted, which is okay, because I've learned from those experiences. I mean, the biggest thing is, I'm a one person operation right now, and I think the thing I learned is, like, I can't try to, like, manage a community on top of doing everything else and do it well. So it's a matter of figuring out, like, okay, how can I build that, and how can I build it right in a way that makes sense for the brand. Some days I'm inclined to get that going sooner, and other days I'm like, no, this is okay. Like, we need to take our time with this because we want to do it right. So it's all right to, kind of drag your feet on it, so to speak, until I can figure out the best way to do that makes sense. But yes, that's very much, I don't want it to be strictly clothing forever. I want there to be a more educational component with action items that actually help people, so that they have, real knowledge, real experiences that they can lean into to help themselves. And, that kind of answers the question from earlier of where can it go from here. I think at some point I will probably step away from how involved I am with the artistic side of it as it stands right now, to focus on reflecting more on what I've learned from my experience and repurposing that content to help other people. When that'll be, I don't know. And I'm okay with that because I know I've got a ton to learn, and the more that I keep going, the clearer that'll become to me. But yeah, that's the cool thing about it. And that's the cool thing about having that abundant mindset. It's like, I feel like there's like 30 different things I can do, which I love. That might sound overwhelming to some, but for me, I'm just like, I'd rather have 30 options than only have one, or none, or, whatever.
I think that's something that a lot of creatives, value, is having the freedom to go explore and experiment. And I think for some things you have to do that. Like you have to go down a path to see if is this the one I'm supposed to go down further. And for some people, you have to experience a little bit of that. You just can't analyze it and pretend. You got to go down that path a little bit and say, okay, this isn't what I thought it was. Let me pull back. But that's the only way you're going to find yourself going down the right path for dreaming big, is to experiment these other ones and see, is this really right or not? Some of it's a feeling thing. Some of it is a market telling you, like, okay, we don't want this from dreaming big. So as much as I might want to do that, I got to listen to my audience and my community and not do it. I think just from my standpoint, because community is something that I really appreciate. I have a community for financial advisors, totally different than dreaming big. But I think that going back to the hundreds, and the way I think about pursuit and what I want to see happen is, you probably have more community than you realize. It's just undefined and it's out there. And I think that's great to get going. And you can continue to build community behind the brand and the messaging of dreaming big. And then as you add some other offerings, like maybe you bring the podcast back in the future, and now you have listeners, and now you've given this community something else from you. And then one day it'll click and like, okay, this is where I can give my community a place to hang out. And because the community has grown, you don't necessarily have to be as big of a part of it as you would if you started it today and tried to build from scratch. So, and that's, what the hundreds have done. You look at NFT projects and all these other things that the community gobbles up. They didn't necessarily set out and say, hey, we want to build a community to be able to have all these other products. It's just, hey, we've got our message. We're doing our thing. We're creating dope clothes. People like it. We're going to keep being who we are. And then that builds up the fan base, which becomes the community. And then it gives you a lot of options from there. So you probably have more community than you realize. You got one community member.
So, to that note, how did you go about forming your community?
It's not so different from what I laid out. So I have a co-founder, and I actually approached him about doing a marketing/branding newsletter for financial advisors. He's a marketing whiz, SEO. Like, I'm not that detailed, but I love like branding and ideas. I thought we could together put together a good newsletter. And he came up with the idea of doing a community. And at the time, I was trying to go down a path of working with entrepreneurs at my planning firm. And the ultimate end game was I wanted to create a community for entrepreneurs. And the only way to be a part of that community was to be my client. And when he threw that out there, I was like, all right, I was going to build a community over here, but maybe it's supposed to be over here. The way we built it was we went back to the advisors we'd had one-on-one, like pick your brain sessions on. And we put together a list of like 300 advisors over basically a year and a half that we had calls with independently, and just said, hey, we sent them an email. We've talked over the last year, about business. We're putting together this community. We thought you might be interested in it. We have an opening date. We're hoping to get 50 people in because it's a paid community, not a free community. And within 72 hours, we had our 50 first members. So it was like, we were genuinely interested in talking to other advisors to learn. We were happy to share abundant mindset once again, to try to make other advisors better if they thought they could learn from us. But in doing that, we were building community, and we didn't know it. And then the idea came, we had the platform for it, and now we have like 175 advisors across the globe that share and help each other get better, which is really cool because most advisors see another financial advisor as a competitor. So we just built community off of genuinely looking to help people, realizing that we could get more of these people together, provide a platform for them, and then the community's grown from there. We just released a book. So I think community is very hard to do right. And I think when you go into it with a view of this is how I'm going to build it,
it becomes harder. I think the best way to build community is to just allow your fans to continue to follow you and grow that fan base. And then one day put it together. Here's how I can help these people get together. So now these like-minded people have a place to get together, to share a common interest, get to know each other. And then that's where the real magic of community happens. Because a lot of communities have all these other offerings, technology, and there's like other things that people want to buy into the community for. I think the best communities it's all about the people inside of it. So I just think it's, you keep on doing what you're doing. I think giving your followers more access to you through like the podcast or writing or something like that strengthens the community. And then one day maybe you say, hey, we've got a bunch of people that have been emailing, like you set up a Slack channel. And I've seen big communities start out just in a Slack channel, and then they outgrow Slack and they move to a platform. But I think it's slow and organic is the best way, which I think is the best way for a lot of things to grow. If you put too much pressure on it and you try to form it into something, I think you end up stifling the growth.
So then when you had your 50 advisors sign up, so like, let's say I'm one of those 50 that signed up. Next week, do I get like an email that only goes to that group? Like what did that give me access to? And how often did you guys have to feed it, if that makes sense, to kind of, because I think one of the goals is like, you kind of want them to run themselves a little bit, but I think there's got to be some sort of moderation, and some ones need to drive the boat a certain way for it. Maybe not, but like just to keep it going, to keep the activity going.
Yeah. So we opened up in August. We thought we would start it in October. We gave ourselves plenty of time to get it. And so we scrambled, and basically in September, we opened up the community. So our community, we use a platform. We started out on Mighty Networks. We merged over to Circle, which these are platforms built for community. So part of the community access was think of it as a combination between like Facebook, Twitter, and Slack. You got access to this online community that no one else got access to. And in there were other financial advisors who were willing to share. We had guest speakers. So every month we had a guest speaker. And in the early days, we had a guest speaker every week. We launched in 2019. So we were getting things going right before COVID. So everybody was living on Zoom anyway. So we had industry speakers, but one of our first guest speakers was Rory Sutherland, who's a marketing genius and has a book called The Alchemist, Alchemy, which was an amazing marketing book. He came and spoke to us. So we had guest speakers. There were some resources in there. But what it really got you to was access to this online website where no one else could go into that wasn't a member. So now there's masterminds that have formed in there. We have guest speakers every month. We have a marketing office hours with my partner, Taylor, again, who's a marketing wizard, and people would pay thousands of dollars to consult with him. And he comes in every month on the first Tuesday of the month and has a marketing office hours with our members. That's part of the membership.
That's awesome.
So there's those things that way where I think that like sometimes the community is just giving people a place to get together to talk about like-minded things. So like I think about dreaming big. What I would think about is, maybe there's a monthly office hours with you to hear about what you're working on, and just giving people more access to a brand that they love. Everybody in the outside is not going to get to hear about the next project you're working on or who you're collabing with. And maybe one month you bring in somebody that you happen to know through your network connections that me as a community member would enjoy hearing from and having the opportunity to ask that person a question. So I don't think that you would have to do a lot. It depends on what you promise and also maybe what you're charging. But I think that you are right that a really strong community doesn't need the founders to run it after time. If you have a strong community, then you have community members who want to step into roles of leadership. So I mentioned the book. We had a community member that she headed up basically the whole organization of the book. And she wanted to, and she volunteered to do it, and she loved every moment of it. So a really strong community will naturally have some people in it who love it so much that want to take on some leadership roles. And, maybe you throw them some extra swag, or you give them some extra perks for taking on a leadership role. But we have a community manager now. So Mallory handles all the onboarding and organization of the platform. But other than that, the life of the community is the people that are in it. And we're lucky enough to attract the right people who wanted to be there. And the final thing I would say is you think about a community for Dreaming Big is you want people who want to come to the community to give more than they take.
Right.
What is it about this community that somebody from the outside could come in and give to the community? Because if more people are giving, then there's the ability to grow and learn. So, there's tons of ideas that pop in my mind that I can give you offline, and we can have another call, not podcast wise, and just say, hey, here is what we've experienced. Here's what I've seen other communities do that maybe would work for Dreaming Big, just to plant that seed and let it grow. But I kind of love that we went this direction and just, business ideas on the fly, because it's part of the creative process.
Yeah, no, I'll take you up on that. So I hope you were serious about that offer.
Right.
But as you explained all that, one of the things I thought of, that is probably a big reason why mine failed, so to speak, was that, my intent every time I created, whether it was like a Facebook group or a Discord or whatever, was I really wanted there to be a place where people could come and network with each other to get ideas about, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. This is the thing I'm struggling with. And at that point, I envision other people being like, oh, here's something you could try. Here's something you could try, blah, blah, based on what I've done or based on what I saw. And when that never really happened, it was like, oh, okay, that, this is going to require more work than I can give it or what I know that I need to supply. Mm-hmm. So it's like, all right, well, maybe I need to repurpose and start with maybe some more like-minded individuals that way we can start kind of, maybe I just start with like creators or something like that and then branch out from there, but we can offline about that.
Well, as you say that, the thing that pops in my mind is I think that the marketing behind why the community exists is important. So to me, it would be, the Dreaming Big community is for the dreamers. This is a community for like-minded people who have dreams they want to pursue and want to help each other be able to do that. And I think that you leave it at that. So that way I know that, okay, if I'm going to join this community, there's going to be other creative people who are looking to build brands, whatever it might be. And we all know that we can't do it by ourselves. So let's join this community and share each other. And then, maybe you make the promise that once a month you'll have some type of guest speaker come in and talk about something. And if you find out a lot of your community members are interested in clothing, then it's okay. We'll have somebody come in and talk about sourcing and somebody come back in about design work and marketing and those types of things. SEO to get it in there, how to use paid ads and Google, ads and things of that sort. You could bring in somebody once a month. So you're committed to 12 speakers that would be valuable to that community. And then I do think I always think an office hour, because every person who joins a community is a fan of the person starting it. And if you can give them access to you, even though you might feel like you're not anybody special, somebody's looking up to you and they would enjoy having more of your time. And 1 hour a month to talk about what's going on in Dreaming Big and then just answer questions or talk shop, people would value that. And I think that right there would be a great foundation for a small community. And then you just naturally let it grow, whether it be word of mouth or, when you're sending out shipments, you have a little flyer you put in there about, hey, the Dreaming Big community, here's what it's for, maybe it starts out as a free community. And then as time goes on and the community grows, you find ways to offer more value, that now you have a tiered system. So there's always a free level, but if you want more, you can step up. You start putting people together, like mastermind groups. I could see where that would take off. I'm a part of another community it's all for creators. These things exist out there and there's more than enough opportunity to help people. So we'll definitely chop it up on.
Yeah, because it's, like I said, it's something that I've attempted and failed a few times now. So yeah, but it's also it's something that I value, and it's something that I do want to provide. Which I guess that was the original question. To circle back a little bit. So yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Yeah, let's get to your creative process, because I Pursuit itself is not exclusively for creatives, but I do think I will attract a lot of creatives. What does your creative process look like? So if you don't have a background in art, you have a background in kinesiology, at least from an education standpoint, how do you come up with your ideas and kind of source those?
So, I know you probably want a direct answer, and I'll get there eventually, but it's something that's forever changing and forever evolving. You know, the way I designed stuff 15 years ago compared to now is completely different. Like I said earlier, you know, I started out by just seeing things that I liked, and my process was, I wonder if I can make a Dream Big version of that. And kind of like the process you described earlier with your logo, it was very much like that was it for a very long time. There were pros and cons to that. The pros were that in the process, I was teaching myself how to create these things digitally, and whether it be Photoshop or Illustrator, which I didn't have any experience in those programs either. So it's like I'm having to Google, YouTube, whatever, what I thought the effect I was trying to create was in my best way possible, you know, because I don't know all the jargon and all that. And then I'm watching tutorials on like how to do it. And, you know, in the process of that sparks a new idea. And it's like, ooh, okay, there's another lane I can go down if I want to. And yeah, that was my process for a very long time, was just recreating other stuff, putting my spin on it. The con to that was I felt incomplete. Like I felt like I wasn't really creating. I thought I was just like copying other people's work, essentially. Granted, I was still making my own, but it didn't feel as authentic. I carried on that way for probably about 12 years, and I got better about getting further away from what the inspirational piece was to start. And I think about 3 years ago, I finally had the realization that I'm making my own designs that I can stand by and say that they are original. And I think it was just a process of doing things that way for so long, but knowing that at some point I gotta get away from that and just do things on my own. And that's where I'm at now. You know, even like preparing for this podcast, you know, you sent over a list of things that we're going to talk about. Previously, I probably would have gone through and written everything that I wanted to say out so that I'd be super organized and whatnot. You know, I went through and kind of answered each question in my head, and I did this over a course of a few days. And I really just thought and kind of chewed on things for a while. And then today came and I kind of just shut everything off and was like, all right, I've kind of done the mental prep work that I want to do for this. And I think I've got some good talking points stowed away. And I'm going to shut all that off. And then once we hit play, I'm just going to let the magic happen.